Ladies and gentlemen, we're about to begin the funeral service. We ask for those that have a cell phone or pager, if you could turn it to the silent mode. Officiating is Rabbi Tzvi Engel.
We're gathered this morning to pay our last respects to Jeaninne bat Beryl Cohn. As our minhag will open with a chapter of Tehillim, I'll ask grandson Jacob Best to kindly come forward to recite it at Mizmor Chav Gimel. And you're welcome to follow along in the service folder. I'll be reading it in Lashon HaKodesh.
מזמור לדוד, אדוני רואה לאכזר, בינתא שירביצני על מי מנוחות ינעלני. נפשי ישוב ינחני במעגלי צדק למען שמה, גם כי אלך בגיא צל מוות, לא ירא רע, כי אתה עמדי, שבטך משענתך המה ינחמוני. תרך לפני שולחן נגד צהרי, תשענת והשמן ראשי כוסי רביעה. אך טוב וחסד ירדפוני כל ימי חייו, ושבתי בבית אדוני לאורך ימים.
We're here this morning from a few speakers, members of the family. Even though it's before Yom Kippurim, we're not allowed really to give eulogies, full eulogies. But I think the fact that we're here all together is itself fulfillment of the words of the book of Kohelet, V'achai yitena libo. Those who live on will take it to heart. That is our preparation for Yom Kippurim. We're gathered here to pay our last respects to Jeaninne Best of blessed memory. I'll open just with the first words. I'll call them words of tribute. The truth is they were used as words of eulogy first by Avram Avinu there in Hebron when he interred Sarah Imenu. The Medrash Tanchuma describes that these were the words that he recited before the townspeople who may or may not have understood the words that he spoke, but certainly the cadences of the language that he used made very clear what Sarah Imenu meant to him. And I would submit what Jeaninne Zichronah Livracha means to this family and to me as a rabbi and to us as a community of friends and congregational family and extended family. Eshet chayil miyimtza v'rachok mipninim michra batach ba'alev ba'ala v'shalal lo yechsar gmalatu tov v'lo ra kol yemei chayeha darishat semer ufishtim vataz b'chefetz kapeha hayeta ka'oniot socher mimerchak tavi lachma ותקום בעוד לילה ותתטרף לביתה וחוק לנערותיה זממה שדה ותיקחהו מפרי כפיה נטעו כרם חגרה בעוז מותניה ותאמץ זרועותיה טעמה כי טוב שכרה לא יכבה בלילה נרה ידיה שילחה וקישור וכפיה תמכו פלך כפה פרסה לעני וידיה שילחה לאביון לא תירה לביתה משלג כי כל ביתה לבוש שנים מרבדים עשתה לה שש וארגמן לבושה נודע בשערים בעלה בשבתו עם זקני ארץ סדין עשתה ותמכור וחגור נתנה לכנעני עוז והדר לבושה ותשחק ליום אחרון פיה פותחה בחוכמה ותורת חסד על לשונה צופיה הליכות ביתה ולחם עצלות לא תאכל קמו בניה וישרוה בעלה ויהללה רבות בנות עשו חיל ועטלית על כולנה שקר החן והבל היופי אישה יראת אדוני היא תתהלל תנולה מפרי ידיה ויהללוה בשערים מעשיה. We'll now hear words of tribute from Eddie, and then Allison, and Talia, and then Aviva, who will be reading a speech from Yonatan from Eretz Yisrael. So ask Eddie to kindly come forward, start us off.
I was told that my job this morning was to provide, very briefly, some details about my mother's life rather than heartwarming anecdotes or deep insights. Since you all know I'm not very good at following directions, or particularly deep, you'll get some facts and hopefully a few cute anecdotes. My mother, Jeaninne Best, went by many different titles. My mother was born on Sunday, December 16, 1934, and became a daughter. She was the firstborn of Dorothy and Bernard Cohn. My mother's parents were a fixture in our family, and my mother was a devoted daughter and later daughter-in-law. A few years later, my mother's family welcomed a baby boy they named Arthur, and my mother then became a sister. My mother was an exceptional student, no jokes please, skipping 3.5 grades, and at age 16 became a graduate of Roosevelt High School. Because she didn't feel ready to attend college, my mother got a job for a few years. Eventually, she enrolled at Roosevelt University and became an accounting student. During college, my mother frequented the deli at which my father's brother-in-law, High, worked. My mother, a vivacious blonde, caught his eye, and he set up my mother with my father. At the time, my father was a mechanical engineer, no doubt at least partially responsible for my niece Aviva's and my son Ari's decision to study mechanical engineering. They dated for a bit, but my father, 9 years my mother's senior, put on the brakes when he found out how young my mother was. Notwithstanding that my father was a lowly West Sider and my mother was an Albany Parker, my mother recognized the diamond in the rough and sent my father a holiday card, which led them to get back together. They married on January 29th, 1956, and my mother then became a wife. While my mother cherished many of her other titles, I think the most precious to her was wife. She talked often about how she missed my father and how she looked forward to reuniting with him in the world to come. I imagine they're holding hands right now and so happy to be back together forever. It's my first breakdown. My mother graduated college the next year. She planned to take the CPA exam and practice for a bit before starting a family. My father, though, had other ideas. He agreed that if my mother passed the CPA exam, they would wait to start a family, but if she didn't pass, they'd get cracking on that family idea of his. To stack the deck in his favor, my father came home from work every night while my mother was studying and insisted they go out for dinner or to a movie or bowling, and generally made it impossible for my mother to study. For the first time, and probably the last, my mother failed an exam. And on November 25th, 1958, my much older sister Allison was born, and Jean became a mother. 3 years later, my parents welcomed the joy of their life, yes, me. My mother loved to tell the story that after I was born, the nurse told my mother they couldn't find my father, who apparently had gone looking for a cup of coffee. 4 years later, my brother Barry was born, and our family was complete. During the early days of our family, the best family players loved to make home movies and travel. We took a train trip to Colorado Springs, a plane trip to Miami, which Barry called Yorami, and driving trips to Canada and New York. We had a Dalmatian named Spotty for about a week or two, and a blue parakeet named Bluey. Naming pets was not a strong suit of the best. We first lived in West Rogers Park on Whipple Street, which was more like a kibbutz than a street. We have a home movie of the great blizzard of 1967 showing my mother trudging in waist-high snow to the corner gas station to buy milk. Our freezers were full of loaves of bread and meat, and the shelves were filled with canned goods, and my mother supplied much of the block with food until the street was cleared and people could go shopping. My parents were active members of our synagogue near Talmud. It was a very special place with very special people, and was a central part of our lives. I remember spending countless hours helping my mother proofread the annual ad book. Like so many other families, my parents began to look into moving to the suburbs in the early 1970s. They found what I'm told was a brand new big house in Northbrook and put in a bid. Before they finalized the deal, my parents took a hard look at how they saw their future playing out, living in Northbrook, and what they really wanted for their family. They came to a momentous decision and let the house go and transferred us from public school to Hillel Torah Jewish Day School. That decision changed the course of our lives. Once we were all in school, my mother decided to go back to work and work part-time running my father's office and part-time for an accountant. Eventually, my mother opened her own tax practice, concentrating on helping single and divorced women. For a number of years, my parents commuted to work together, with my mother running her practice for my father's office. It says a lot that my parents spent so much time together and got along so well. For one of their anniversaries, I think it was their 20th, they both decided to make surprises for each other. My mother needle-pointed a tallis bag for my father. She made most of it sitting in the car next to him on their daily commute without him ever figuring it out. Luckily, he had his eyes on the road. My father, an amateur calligrapher, made an Eshet Chayil, the proverb, a woman of valor that we just heard the rabbi say, for my mother. Sometimes he tried to go to work on a Sunday to work on the surprise, and when he said he was going to the office, my mother would say, "Great, I'll come with you. I have some work I can get done." Eventually, he did get it done, and if you come back to the house, you'll see the Eshet Chayil hanging in my parents' dining room and the tallis bag on the dining room table. My mother took some accounting classes and decided to take another shot at the CPA exam, and in 1983, she finally passed the CPA exam. It took her 25 years, but she did it. Now she was Jean Best CPA. My mother is also a cousin, an aunt, and a machatenista, a uniquely Yiddish word for a person's relationship with their child's in-laws. Now, you might have noticed that I haven't yet used the phrase in-law to describe my mother, because she treated in-laws the same as blood relatives. This was especially true with Alan, my brother-in-law, Jane, my wife, and now Barry's wife, Malka. In 1984, my sister gave birth to Dina, who just got in from Israel about an hour ago. And my mother added the title Bubby Yiddish for grandmother. She was so proud to be a bubby to 11 grandchildren, including Dina and Asher, Aviva and Itai, Talia, Jacob and Rachel, Noah and Emma, Ari, Rachel, and soon to include Albert. She was also bubby to 9 great-grandchildren, including Yonatan, Chana, Tuvia, Amichai, Yair, Nadav, Maya, Elah, and Dani. Hopefully some more. Not only did her grandchildren and great-grandchildren call her bubby, but many people outside of her family even called her bubby or bubby best. She really relished that title and loved nothing more than having an ice cream social or a sleepover with her grandchildren or great-grandchildren. After her family, my mother cherished most her many, many friends. So many of her friends had been her friends for 20, 30, or even 40 years. Even as she got older and less mobile, she had lunch or dinner plans with friends 2 or 3 days a week and spent countless hours on the phone every day keeping up with friends. My mother made friends wherever she went because she took an interest in everyone and spent the time to get to know them. She knew the names of everyone, from the checkout people at the Howard Jewel to the elevator operator at the Passover program in San Diego. I hear so often from friends of mine that they ran into my mother at the grocery store and spent 5 or 10 minutes in the aisle catching her up on their lives. She remembered everyone's birthday with a call, a store-bought card, or even a handwritten note. She was also a friend to so many people she didn't even know through her charitable work and donations. She sent a check, even if it was small, to everyone who asked. Last night, when we were cleaning up in preparation for Shiva, we found some stamped envelopes she intended to mail, including 3 or 4 to charities we'd never even heard of. I hope I've been able to set the table a bit for Allison and Talia, who will talk more about my mother. Before I sit down, I want to make sure I also mention my mother's sense of humor. My mother loved a good joke, both telling it and hearing it. The last message she left on my voicemail was asking for me to call her because she had a joke for me. I guess that one's going to have to wait. Let me close by paraphrasing from the Eshet Chayil proverb that my father calligraphied for my mother and the rabbi just read. A woman of valor who can find, for her price is far above rubies. Her children rise up and call her blessed. Her husband also, and he praises her. Grace is deceitful and beauty is vain, but a woman that fears the Lord, she shall be praised. Many daughters have done valiantly, but you, Mom, rise above them all. Thank you.
Eddie and I had a little duplication, so I'm going to cut some of mine out. But Eddie, that was great. Our mom was a forward thinker. She passed the CPA exam when she was in her upper 40s, relearning subjects she hadn't looked at in over 20 years. When the regulations changed and CPAs were allowed to sell insurance and annuities, our mom became certified and expanded her business even further. She saved her clients tens of thousands of dollars by advising them to buy long-term care insurance. My mom's own foresight had her buy catastrophic health insurance, which would be an immense help down the road. Around the time I began high school, my dad started his own mechanical engineering firm, Michael Best and Associates. My mom, already his biggest cheerleader, became his secretary, bookkeeper, and business manager. Eventually, while still managing my dad's business, my mom started her own tax practice out of his office. When he retired, she moved her office to Northfield, and eventually to their house in Skokie until she retired just a few years ago. We are all in awe of how they happily and productively lived together, drove downtown together, and worked together, day after day and year after year. In their free times, our parents loved to travel, going on many cruises and many trips abroad to Israel and all over Europe. After my dad retired, they bought a condo in Florida and spent many winters commuting back and forth between Florida and Chicago, so my mom could keep working during tax season. Looking at her active lifestyle, one could never have guessed that my mom has been living with metastatic breast cancer for almost 8 years. My mom's response to cancer the first time around, back in 1996, was to continue working and to fill up her and my dad's social calendar, meeting friends for dinner multiple nights each week. In fact, even today, Talia frequently tells people that her bubby has the most active social life of anyone in the family. Talia will tell you about 3 of our mom's favorite places to shop and eat, and I'll add one more, Van Mauer in the Glen, where she just recently bought 4 new Rosh Hashanah outfits for her 4 great-grandchildren who live in Skokie. 2 of them are wearing them today. My mom did not want people to treat her like a sick person, so she shared her cancer diagnosis with almost no one outside of the immediate family. She wanted to live and be positive, and did not want people to see her, put on their sad faces, and ask in a soft voice how she was feeling. She would much rather see people and talk about regular things, not about her cancer. In January of 2016, 4 years after our dad died, my mom found out that the breast cancer that had been in remission for 20 years returned with a vengeance and was all throughout her bones. She did what was necessary to keep on living: surgery to strengthen a bone, rehab, and a life of one medicine after another and one blood test and scan after another. What would have overtaken most people's lives was just a small, small part of my mother's full life. She kept on living and living with gusto. Over recent months, the numbers and scans were not looking good. Our mom was losing some of her energy and needed to nap in the afternoon. Just last week, my mom said in her matter-of-fact voice, talking about even more tumors in her liver, "There's that word again, innumerable." And then it was on to something else. She just got a new 3-year car lease, telling us repeatedly that if she died, the lease was up and we would owe nothing. My mom drove herself to nearly every single doctor's appointment and handled all of her bills and insurance and maintained her house by herself, including having all of the outside windows washed just days ago. She was fiercely independent and such a fighter. Over the last few years, she's had a number of falls, and by a miracle from God, each time no bones were broken and she bounced back. She recently qualified for an expensive new medicine, and this past week had all the insurance and financing figured out. We did not expect her to go so soon. Thank yous to all of the out-of-town grandchildren for getting here: Jacob and Rachel, Noah and Emma, and Rachel and Albert from New York, Ari from Maryland, and Dina all the way from Israel. So you could be here to give this final honor to your bubby. One more special mention to a dear relative who has been such a big part of my mother's life, her cousin Elaine. Both having one brother, my mom and Elaine considered each other the sister they never had. During COVID, I remember my mom telling me how she and Elaine would meet in a parking lot, roll down their car windows, and proceed to have an in-person conversation. A lot more daring than a lot of us were. Elaine, my mom was so lucky to have you in her life. To conclude, I would like to mention some special nachas, joys. First and foremost, I cannot overstate the tremendous deep joy and nachas my mom got from seeing Barry and Malka get married last year. This isn't a class all by itself. Our mom also had such a joyous time going to New Jersey last month to participate in Rachel and Albert's engagement party. Speaking of my mom being forward-thinking, this part didn't get printed, so I'm going to ad-lib. My mom brought a bunch of gifts, mostly homemade, including a challah cover that she embroidered. Years ago, she embroidered challah covers for every grandchild, and the 4 married ones already have the challah cover. And she brought one for Rachel and Albert with their initials on it, and she left 2 more, for God willing, for Ari and Talia, and told me how I could embroider their initials on them when the time comes. Finally, our dad's Hebrew name was Meir, meaning light. Having 2 great-grandsons, Aviva's Nadav Meir and Dina's Yair, carry our dad's name and his light to give Mom a lot of nachas, gave her. In fact, Nadav's wearing my dad's kippah today, which is so nice to see. My mom is a very hard act to follow, and I pray that Eddie, Barry, and I will be blessed with the foresight, wisdom, wit, and strength to carry her torch.
I'd like to thank you all so much for being here today, Erev Yom Kippur, to honor the life of my bubby, Jean Bess, Zichronah Livracha, of blessed memory. Before I begin, I'd like to make 2 quick points. Number 1, I feel a tremendous amount of humility and solemnity as I share these words on the eve of Yom Kippur, the most holy day of the Jewish year. I pray that these words honor my bubby's memory and share just a hint of the love and appreciation my sisters and cousins and I had and have for her. Secondly, I would be remiss to not mention that I feel almost as uneasy sharing while I feel my bubby's presence among us today. My bubby asked me to speak at her funeral when I was 15, which for anyone who knew her was not such an unusual request. She even asked several months ago to look over and edit my words, which I refused to prepare before her death. My bubby always had a great sense of humor and had no problem asking for exactly what she wanted. But I hope she will forgive me today for any grammar inaccuracies or details that I'm remembering slightly different from her near-perfect memory. To know my Bubby is to understand that she was so much of so many things. You'd need to capture her remarkable brain, her expansive heart, her profound soul, her always amusing wit, and her fierce spirituality to appreciate the remarkable life she led. Maimonides, in his introduction to the laws of personal development, Rambam Hilchot Deot, notes that his first positive commandment is Lehidamot Bidrachav, to emulate Hashem's ways. A person should spend his or her life trying to liken themselves, kiviyachol, to God, and in doing so live a meaningful life. As we enter a holiday where we repeatedly remember God's 13 attributes of mercy through song, I thought it would be fitting to describe just 3 of the ways in which my grandmother lived 88 years of her exceptional life emulating Hashem's ways, and in doing so, bringing God's presence into this world. Among so many other great qualities, my Bubby embodied being Rachum v'chanun, Rav Chesed, and Emet, compassionate, abundantly giving, and both emulating and searching for truth. My Bubby lived a full life of love. Let's start with Emet, emulating and searching for truth. I just have to start with her brain. My Bubby literally knew everything about everything. She was a brilliant woman with a passion for linguistics, the English language, math, ethics, fashion, the arts, and everything she could get her hands on. When my Bubby was in grammar school, she received a report card with excellent being A and super being B. She received all but 1 excellent and a super in penmanship, which was handwriting. And my Bubby, for anyone who knew her, had really stunning script handwriting and a gift for calligraphy, and she just couldn't accept the grade from her teacher. She demanded excellence. She said, "Give me a super in music," she said. "I can't even carry a tune, but I deserve excellence in penmanship." My Bubby knew her worth and her strengths and always used them to better the world around her. This was a continuing theme throughout her life. My Bubby skipped 3 half grades and began college at the age of 16. In the business school at Roosevelt University of over 400 graduating students, my Bubby was one of 3 women and the only woman in her accounting major. My Bubby held a successful career as a CPA, something that brought her great pride and joy. She continued her business well into her 80s and maintained close relationships with her clients. She was trusted and beloved by them all. A passion project of hers was spending 20 years lecturing thousands of women around the state on financial literacy, teaching women about the importance of having a handle on their finances and understanding their family wealth. She recently described to me that she got several threats from men saying that she was putting crazy ideas in their wives' heads about having their own checking accounts. What I admired so much about Bubby was the way in which she somehow managed to be exceptionally progressive while also steadfastly traditional. She was an expert in the kitchen and knew everything going on in her children's and grandchildren's lives, while she also managed a full, successful career. This sentence doesn't even properly capture the decades of baking, laundry, carpools, birthday parties, tax seasons, near Talmud board meetings, family dinners, anniversaries, and innumerable best family milestones she held together with expert organization, dedication, and grit. My Bubby was the GOAT of working moms. Besides for being so smart and well-read, I gotta say that my Bubby took on Apple technology like a pro in her 80s. She's even the one to show me how to add little confetti after you send an iMessage, and she'd send them very frequently. And my nephew, Yonatan, described her as the coolest great-grandmother in the world, which is such a fitting title. Even greater than her brains was my Bubby's one-of-a-kind heart. The second godly attribute my Bubby embodied was the attribute of being Rachum v'chanun, compassionate. She was incredibly caring to those she knew well and practically everyone she came into contact with. Trips to Jewel with my Bubby were never short. She would stop by every employee and address them by name. "Manuela, how is your grandson feeling after his eye surgery?" "Peter, how are the children?" "Jeff, the pickled corned beef you suggested was outstanding." These are all real things she used to say. She made friends wherever she went and always cared to know how everyone fared. Going out to dinner with my Bubby was the best because every waiter loved her. We'd get gifted free desserts frequently because of her wonderful midot and genuine care my grandmother expressed toward them. One of my favorite stories about Bubby was going in the car with her one time to FedEx. We were delivering a package of chocolate chip cookies she baked to send to my cousin Ari at Camp Mosheva. We walked into FedEx and she said, "Hi Phil, hi Jerry, it's great to see you again. Yes, these are the cookies I told you about for my grandson." It's just such a Bubby story. She knew all my friends by name and wanted frequent updates on what they were up to, who they were dating, and how they were. She was loved by so many people around her. My friend joked that my Bubby is the mayor of Skokie. She would be seen all the time making her rounds at Emma's to all of the people she knew. And without being a busybody or a yenta, she knew everything that went on with everyone and kept them in her prayers and Tehillim. I'm so glad that my Bubby got to attend a weekly Tehillim shir I just started teaching because she was my inspiration for falling in love with the book of Tehillim. Her list only got longer as the years went on. I got the tremendous zechut of getting to take her to and from shul over the last few years. On these walks, we would pass by numerous people and community members' homes. She'd tell me how much this one needed a refuah shalema, how that one needed a shidduch, how she could tell by the person's face we passed that they were going through something hard, and how much she loved all of her neighbors. She felt the community's problems and sicknesses and suffering and channeled it all toward HaKadosh Baruch Hu and beseeching him for mercy and compassion. She literally had God on speed dial. Before any performance, math test, job interview, or big day, my Bubby would text and call all her grandchildren to let us know we were in her prayers. Growing up, many times when Noah wasn't feeling well and needed to leave school, my Bubby absolutely loved picking him up. She and Zadie would play cards and cribbage with him, and they loved these afternoons with Noe. He always brightened up my Zadie's days. My Bubby gave tzedakah to too many organizations to even begin to count. She recently told my mother, "When I die and you look through my stuff, you are going to be shocked when you see how many charitable contributions I have made." She couldn't get a piece of mail that didn't tug at her heartstrings. She contributed to everything from the Ark to Smile Train to local day schools to tzedakahs in Brooklyn and Eretz Yisrael. My Bubby's heart poured out to anyone hungry or suffering. And she was right. When I went through my Bubby's things on Friday, I began to see what she meant when I saw tons of stationery from her many contributions to the Native American Rights Foundation. In addition to her compassion was her passion and her zest for life. My Bubby had sophisticated taste in everything. She loved the theater and any opportunity to get out and do something fun. She frequently brought her grandkids to the movies and would always sneak in great snacks as a self-proclaimed refreshments chairman. My Bubby always had a joke to share. You could frequently hear my Bubby saying, "I've got a joke, you can tell it to anyone," followed by a sometimes PG-13 or bordering rated R clever joke to come. My Bubby instilled in us a love for culture and music and finding our own passions. It was always remarkable to me how my Bubby had such sophisticated taste and yet was so down to earth. She could be debating politics one minute and the next fangirling over the latest season of The Bachelor. I always left my Bubby and Zadie's house with a new word to add to my vocabulary, and I credit all of our combined love for reading to my Bubby and Zadie. My Bubby loved to stay busy. Even in recent years, I would frequently get a text from a friend one Friday saying, "I saw Bubby Best at Jewel." I'd then get a text from another friend saying, "I saw Bubby Best at Sarah's tent," and it was no mistake. She'd made it to both, and also Village Market, and also the bank before 12 p.m. Even when she wasn't well, her energy often knew no bounds. She kept a very busy social life, and I know so many of her friends, especially ones that are here today, look to her for advice, a listening ear, and loyal friendship. On my visits to Bubby's house, we'd often be interrupted by her friends, calling to ask for her input on something they were dealing with, or looking for a joke from my Bubby to brighten their day. The third attribute is Rav Chesed, full of good deeds towards others. My Bubby was the definition of a Balas Chesed. Even in her days when she wasn't well, my Bubby would literally leave oncology appointments to go deliver chicken soup to her friends in the hospital or nursing homes. Anyone who was struggling would always be gifted with her ever-famous banana cake and chocolate chip cookies, and that cake could really fix most things. I'm guessing if I asked people in here who's been gifted one by her, many, many people would raise their hands. My Bubby was a great baker and got so much joy from feeding others and having delicious meals served out of her kitchen. One of her greatest attributes was her deep sense of gratitude. She always let doctors, community members, and her family know how much she appreciated their help and always gave back doubly to anything she was given. When she received good service from an employee, she would make sure to contact their manager and let them know with profuse praise how terrific their worker was. The most remarkable way in which I saw the endless bounds of her chesed, however, was through my Bubby's tremendous care for my Zadie for the last decade plus of his life, always treating him with respect and love and dignity. That still sits with me as such an inspiration of true love and devotion to his spouse, which I'll end with in a moment. Her chesed can be seen through the way in which she was such an involved grandmother, something I know her children never take for granted. We had countless sleepovers at our Bubby's and Zadie's. Bubby took us out to lunches and brunches and even took most of her grandchildren out for their first driving lessons. She never forgot a birthday card and could always be counted on for the most thoughtful cards. Even this Rosh Hashanah, we received cards wishing us a happy and healthy year. She always made it seem like we lit up her life when we came over to visit, when in fact we were the ones that were so lucky to have the gift of her affection and attention. She made it to every basketball game, Hillel Torah, and Schechter School event, dance shows, performances, and was a big supporter of Ida Crown, where all of her grandchildren attended. She came to everything and made us feel seen, supported, and loved. Dina, Aviva, and I have the best memories of trips to New York to visit my Uncle Barry and seeing Broadway shows together. My Bubby and Zadie treated us to some of our most treasured memories from our childhood. And most of all, she made it seem like it was her absolute pleasure to be with us. You could not have asked for a more present grandparent. I hope to be just a fraction of how committed she was with my own children and grandchildren one day. I'll end with my Bubby's infinite love. The earliest story I remember of my Bubby is the way in which she described her love for her Bubby Ida. She used to follow her to shul and carry her sitter. She'd help her Bubby climb to the second floor balcony at her shul in Albany Park and sit with her while she prayed and sang to Hashem. She loved her Bubby dearly and felt very close to her. I always remember feeling so lucky to have the opportunity to live close to my Bubby and develop a similarly close relationship with her. My Bubby dated quite a bit in her teenage years and met my Zadie at 19 years old. And let's just say my Zadie became a lot cooler once she married my Bubby. Although they were 10 years apart, they were the truest of soulmates. She always wished my cousins and me to have relationships that were as grand as hers and my Zadie's. My Uncle Eddie shared that at the end of my Zadie's life, he said that he had a great life and got everything he ever wanted, that my Bubby was all he ever wanted. And my Bubby told us numerous times over the last 12 years how she couldn't wait to see Zadie again in Shemaim in hopes he didn't get a new girlfriend. It brings me so much comfort to think they will be together this Yom Kippur, watching over the legacy that they have created in the best Malatsky, Feuchtwanger, Suleiman families. Both my grandparents say they got the better end of the deal, and their love story is one my cousins and I look to with great pride and admiration. She always felt so proud to have 3 children that all remained on the path she raised them, that of Torah and mitzvot. Not only that, she was so humbled that all 3 of them were well learned in Torah and spent their free time sharing and spreading Torah. My mother started a women's learning group that has been going strong for almost 10 years and counting. My Uncle Eddie loves all things learning and Judaica and sponsors so many learning opportunities for the community. And my Uncle Barry is more knowledgeable than most rabbis I know and gives numerous shiurim in all the communities he has lived in. They're all well respected by their friends and inspirations to my cousins and me. I'm so glad that my Bubby got to be at my cousin Rachel's engagement party a few weeks ago in New Jersey. It was always so important to her that her grandchildren found loving and doting spouses, and she was head over heels for Albert. Her 4 honorary grandchildren, Asher, Itai, Rachel, and Emma, were in her prayers just as much as her own grandkids, and I know they all felt her love like my cousins and I did from her Good Shabbos texts, calls, cards, presents, and hugs. Bubby knew no bounds for her love for her 7 grandchildren. She was always so proud of Jacob's academic excellence. She loved card games with Ari, trips to Water Tower with Aviva and Dina, or literally any excuse to go to yet another ICJ Grandparents' Day. She just loved being there for her grandchildren. She cherished the time that Aviva's children spent at her home, baking cookies and having ice cream socials and singing together, and was so grateful for Dina and her family's recent visit to Chicago this past summer. She got to have all of her great-grandchildren together in one place. And today she has all her children in one place and her grandchildren in one place. Thank you to the Bests from New York and Maryland for coming in, and thank you, Dina, for coming in from Israel. I'm so thankful that her last time being together with most of the family was over Rosh Hashanah, a holiday that she loves. She was feeling healthy and strong and was so happy to make it to the new year. Bubby, I love you to the moon and back, and I know I haven't even begun to feel all the ways in which I'll miss you. You were a best friend, confidant, matriarch, fellow lover of all things fun, an inspiration, and just the absolute best. I'm so lucky and proud to be your granddaughter and to be part of the Best family. I know you have been wanting to reunite with Zadie for so many years. And I hope you two can be together this Yom Kippur, whatever that means, to sit back and watch the fruits of a remarkable life lived and be proud of your children and grandchildren today and always.
I'm reading 2 different things. One is from Yonatan, the youngest great-grandchild who's in Israel, who wrote this, and a little bit more from our family. All right. Dear family, words can't describe our loss. Instead, I want to focus on the great legacy we, the great-grandchildren, were blessed to witness. It would be an impossible task to cover it all, so I will point out what was important in her eyes, in my eyes, Yonatan's eyes. It was a true honor to be the first great-grandson of the best family. From the second I was born, Bubby took pride at her new title as great-grandmother, and she really was a great one. Never forgot a birthday, never forgot an anniversary, always thinking about everyone and praying for anyone. I can honestly say she had a mind full of one thought only, and it was how to make the people she loved purely happy. I could see it in every step she took in life. She always knew what each person liked to eat so she could cook it for us when we came over. She always asked about other family members every time I would video call her. Never forgot to say, "I'm thinking of you and praying for you," and asked to, as she said, "send my love to everyone." I don't know how she held so much love and caring in only one human body. Wife, mother, grandmother, and great-grandmother were all her technical titles throughout the years, but for us it was just Bubby, a simple Yiddish word that she took and gave a whole new meaning to. She would have been embarrassed if we didn't remember her also as the wife to Zadie. He was her greatest pride and joy. Together they raised an amazing family, and we are all fruits of that strong tree they built together. She took care of him to the last minute. She'd do anything for him. She never stopped loving him and always spoke to me about him. It was the most beautiful sight, seeing her light up speaking about him, even about the smallest thing. I'll never forget the story about the first thing they bought as a married couple. It was a garlic crusher, but it was so special because they got it together. Family was everything to her. We as great-grandchildren, all 9 of us, would want to thank Hashem, God, for being part of her family. 3 kids, 7 grandchildren, 9 great-grandchildren, and still counting. 4 generations of one big loving family. You will never be forgotten. Bubby, anyone who knew you knows that every minute around you is a lesson, whether it's a lesson in grammar, cooking, or how to build a family and set priorities in life. I had the great fortune of creating many memories with you and learning even more from you, visiting, traveling, learning to appreciate theater, love of botanical gardens, and watching your beautiful relationship with Zadie really set the bar high for how to get the most out of this life. Your great-grandchildren are so blessed to not only get to know you, their great-grandmother, but to know her and love her well. My oldest was born 2 months early, and after 6 weeks in the NICU and not much longer at home, you offered to watch him 1 day a week after I went back to work. You wanted him to have as much extra time with family while he was still so small. Even though you were older, not old, that would not stop you from giving this next generation the absolute best of you. My children were always so excited to see or do anything with you, from being picked up from school and baking cookies to undernighters and overnighters, watching a movie, reading a book, having our regular ice cream socials, coming to any performance big or small, even the ones made for you on your front lawn, and pretty much anything. Even now when I read this out loud, I don't know how you had the strength to do it all. You so wanted to make a lasting impression and create memories that would not be forgotten before you left us, and you most definitely have. Today's Erev Yom Kippur, and while we're coming to Yom Hadin, Day of Judgment, we want to ask that you please be Militzat Yosher and vouch for us in heaven. Although it's extremely hard that you're no longer with us, we take comfort in thinking that you are happily reunited with Zadie and even closer to Hashem.
Thank you to all who offered some words. I just learned something moments ago in beautiful words of tribute that were presented, which I was wondering about, but now I just got the answer. It has to do with penmanship. I was so honored on Friday. We got this terrible news. I was in the house at 3600 Grove to see that among the stacks of newspapers and magazines, different things, there was something that I had once written, a sermon that I wrote, typed it up, and Jean had it apparently in her kitchen. It's from 2 years ago. I don't know if she was reflecting on it for the high holidays. I don't really know. But when I saw it, it reminded me to run home and to find the card that she sent me before Rosh Hashanah. And some people send cards around still It's classy, send someone a nice card, but you buy a stack of cards, and they say Shana Tova or something on them. But how many people go out and find the card that actually literally says, for a special rabbi and his family at the new year? And when I opened it, I thought, I said, I can't get over this, but Jean literally, the penmanship, I thought was literally, it looked like a professional wrote it. She was an older person. And how do you write so beautifully with Shana Tova in Hebrew? She signed it. Unfortunately, I missed it. When I called her, I left her a voicemail just to thank her so much. Jean and I had a very warm relationship. She brooked no fools. In my view, she was a consummate professional. We always talk about the fact that as an accountant, she was always working, felt responsible to her clients. But she also would tell me how she felt responsible to her family. As her rabbi, I was privy to some of the knowledge of some of her ailments, but her ailments were not aches and pains. She kept claiming, I'm just going to keep pushing through, and I don't want to dwell on that. And she did not. She did not. I learned a lot from her. And she will be very much missed, I will say, on a personal level by me, and I think, of course, for the whole family. Jean, on Shabbat, Nadav and Dani opened the Aron Kodesh for the Shir HaKavod, dressed beautifully for Shabbat, pulling the cord, opening the doors. This family, these families, your family, are so intrinsically connected to their Judaism, to their traditions. Yeshiva Shel Ma'ala over Yeshiva Shel Mata, in the assembly on high and the assembly down below. This holiday of Yom Kippurim, which is actually a holiday, even though, of course, it's very, very serious, is among other things a holiday because it is the time of the year, more than any other, when we are united with our loved ones in this world and in the next world. We wish, that we would have been zochim to continue to benefit from you, from your smile and your humor, from your steadfastness, not only in a professional side, but in terms of your Judaism, and your warmth, maybe a little longer. The Almighty, He had other plans. But you teach a final lesson today, right now, by enabling all of us to think about how fragile and how temporary and transient our lives are. How fitting that we are able to learn from you and your great legacy as a family person, as a person who loved others, who treated others with respect and dignity, who carried forward a tradition, and who did so with a smile. May your soul, dear Jeaninne Bat Beryl HaKohen, be bound in the bond of everlasting life. And as the family will go not only on this day to perform a very sad mitzvah of Halvayat HaMeit and the Kavura and a very, very short Shiva, there will also be smachot, great times ahead. And I heard in each of the speakers also the beautiful words read from Yonatan from Eretz Yisrael, a sense of connection that you had and have, your beloved Michael, Zichrono Livracha, remember him today as well, and the sense that the family, I believe, just based on the words today and what I know of you already, Jean, over the years, will be carrying forward a legacy of great joy at times of simcha. Even though, of course, your physical presence will be missed, spiritually, your legacy remains very much alive today. May the soul of Jeaninne Bat Beryl HaKohen be a melita yosher for all of us, for Klal Yisrael, and may each of us, as we go to the time period of Yom Kippurim, the time of atonement, fulfillment of the time of atonement for those in this world and the atonement of those who are in the next world, feel so connected to them and they to us. I'd ask you now to kindly rise and recite today the 16th chapter of the Tehillim. We don't say the Kelmale because today is what's called a Hamtakat Hadin, believe it or not, a sweetening of the judgment if someone leaves the world right before a Yom Tov. And so we recite the 16th chapter of the Tehillim. Michtam LeDavid, Shamreini el ki chasiti vach, Amart l'Adonai, Adonai ata, Tovati bal alecha. Likdoshim asher ba'aretz hema, va'adirei kol cheftzivam, Yirbu atzvotam acher maharu, bal asich niskehem midam, uval esa et shmotam al svatai. Adonai menat chelki v'chosi ata tomich gorali, chavalim naflu li ba'neimim, אף נחלת שפרה עלי. אברך את אדוני אשר יעצני, אף לילות יסרוני חיליותי. שיוויתי אדוני לנגדי תמיד, כי מימיני בל אמות. לכן שמח ליבי ויגל כבודי, אף בשרי ישכון לבטח. כי לא תעזוב נפשי לשאול, לא תיתן חסידך לראות שחת, תודיעני אורח חיים סוף אשמחות את פניך, נעימות בימינך נצח. Please be seated.
This concludes the funeral here at the chapel. The interment will take place at Shalom Memorial Park. For those who will be driving in procession, who will be lining up in our parking lot, we ask that while you drive to the cemetery to drive as close as safety permits to the car in front of you. Please have your headlights and hazard lights on while in procession. Being that it's Erev Yom Kippur today, the family would like to leave immediately once we're done here. So if we cannot congregate in the chapel, please everybody go immediately to their vehicles. And if you're going to the cemetery, please go immediately to your cars. Once the interment is over, the family will be coming back to 3600 Grove Street, where they'll be there until approximately 2:55, and they'll be going to the 3 o'clock mincha at our Torah. The following individuals have been asked to act as pallbearers: Alan and all the grandsons and grandson-in-laws. If we can rise as we escort the caskets from the chapel. Once we have left the chapel again, please do not congregate in the chapel or in the parking lot. Please go immediately to the vehicles so the family can get to the cemetery and be able to get back to the Shiva house.